Namaste. It's a great privilege and honor and a pleasure to be here. When I was asked this morning whether I have a prepared speech, whether I have the text of a speech for the keynote address, I sheepishly confessed to Sanjoy that I don't. And I don't know how to write speeches, deliver speeches. I only know I can speak from the heart. And that's what I want to do today. When I was listening to the Honorable Minister and his speech, I found it deeply moving, not only because of the contextual references he made to Mizo culture and Mizo literary traditions, but that he spoke about literature itself in such a moving way. He quoted Israeli writer, and he referenced what he has, the knowledge that he himself has lived with, acquired, and is passing on to his children via the 8 books that he buys and the 2 chapters that he manages to read every week in his very busy schedule. That, I think, says so much about how literature thrives, how it moves people, how words travel, how ideas can transform the world. And my biggest takeaway coming to Mizoram, I came with a sense of wonder, and I was like an excited schoolgirl. The word lay, if I'm pronouncing it right, is such a profound word, as has been said thrice this morning. And it's the word that's going to stay with me because it makes me wonder about language and its many interpretations and how cultures use language. For me, the other thing I wanted to include, also thanks to the minister, is when he quoted Barack Obama and his very powerful speech which propelled him to the greatest job or the most powerful job in the world. I heard that speech too, and I was moved to tears. It was the belief, the self-belief that he displayed, and he was speaking not just for himself, but for his people, a people that were non-represented, really speaking, in the history of the Americas. Another person who influenced me incredibly and very recently was Bad Bunny and his performance at the Super Bowl, the halftime, and what his music says for the Latinos and their completely marginalized existence in a large country like America, their culture, which is often not even paid attention to, or certainly not given the kind of respect it has earned across the world, but not in the US. There were many things when I listened to speakers. I'm always wonderstruck by how moving so many speeches can be. And what the minister referred to as the anecdotal aspect of Obama's speech, where he talked about a young boy growing up in Kenya, and little would he have known he would one day head what they call the world's greatest democracy. It made me think about, in a way, my own early years, my own early life. Growing up in Mumbai, a place which is a planet of its own. It's like no other part of India. Now, I can either see that as a gigantic advantage, which I do, because it's made me and my children and my grandchildren very different from a lot of people I see from other parts of India. We have not lived with the same kind of prejudices. We have lived with other sort of prejudices, but not what I sense and see when I travel extensively across India. Fortunately, LitFest do invite me, and for that I'm always grateful, because it's a great learning for me. So Mumbai teaches you to survive on your own terms. I think it's a very big lesson. Mumbai is accepting, but it's also very savage. If you do not prove yourself, and they don't give you much of a chance, you have to do it quite quickly, then Mumbai really does not have the time for you. Now, it can, to some people, be an extremely harsh reality. But for a lot of people, it's inspirational and it's a trigger to make the best use of the opportunities that come their way. And to sometimes and very often, they find their best selves performing at their optimum from a very young age. When I was growing up in a bureaucratic family, my father was in the Ministry of Law, and his great ambition for his youngest child, that was me, I'm the youngest of 4 siblings, was that I should join the civil service and become, possibly get into the IAS and contribute to nation building. It was a very lofty and wonderful ambition for a father of that generation to have. My other three siblings and his other 3 children had not let him down. They had fulfilled his dreams. My brother by becoming an IIT engineer, one of the early batches. One sister becoming a gold medalist ophthalmic surgeon. The other sister becoming a lawyer and then moving to New York. And then there was me, and nothing much was expected from me. And his unfinished dream for one of his children was to appear for this exam, so he could say, oh, all my 4 children have done so well. My youngest daughter is now an IAS officer. But it's also important for young people to recognize their own dreams, which is what I want to tell you. That was his dream, it was not mine. Had I gone ahead and forced myself to try and impress my father and make his dream come true, I would not be here today. These were early lessons. I must have been 14 or 15 when I found the courage within me to tell him that it was not my dream and he should leave me to find my own way in life, make my own path, and most importantly, to make my own mistakes. I think a lot of us don't recognize the rights of the young. We don't recognize that they have minds of their own, they have dreams of their own, and they have the right to go ahead and fulfill those. So to all the young students here today, I want to say, believe in yourselves. Some of us, it takes us a while to find who that self is, but it does not matter. Don't let the world rush you. Take your time. Your dreams can change. There's no such thing as a fixed dream. There's no such thing as society dictating what your dream should be. You decide for yourself. And if your dream is not to scale the highest peak because someone else in your class has done it, that's fine. Good luck to the person who's scaling that peak. You can take pride in that person's achievement. If your dreams are much smaller and in society's eyes, they're insignificant dreams, don't let that deter you. Own your dreams, because only then will you find fulfillment within yourself to do what you want to do. What you want to do is very important. It's not what society expects of you. It's not what society thrusts upon you. It's not what your family dictates. It's asking yourself, will this make me happy? Will this decision, tough as it may be at that time, make me a better person? Will I be able to live a life of truth on my own terms? Actually, that's the only question anyone needs to ask themselves. That one single question. And then last night something happened which has moved me a lot. I received this book from Pratap. And the title itself was, But I Am One of You, Northeast India and the Struggle to Belong. In a way, upset me. In a way, it was an appeal. It was a cry. We shouldn't even be saying this. Why should anyone in India have to say and repeat and demand to be included? That the Northeast, all 8 states, now no longer 7 sisters, has not been represented in very equal terms is something known. I don't want to emphasize on that. I want to emphasize on the contents of this book, very ably edited by Preeti Gill and her colleague, Samrat Chaudhary. And I was just so enriched reading, flipping through it. I couldn't read the whole book, but of course I gave priority to Pratap's very wonderful essay. Got to know so much more about him than his very self-deprecatory personality, where he's always underplaying his own intellect and his own abilities. And I just want to share the line that moved me the most from his essay, because it just says so much about the literature festival we are all here to participate in, to celebrate. Words, ideas, even anxieties, because very often we overlook collective anxiety, we overlook personal anxiety, we overlook insecurities, we become performative because the internet has made all of us performative. We have to know, to recognize the power of the internet, the power of social media, but let that not dominate you. You have to be on top of it, not social media on top of you. Another strong message for our young students here. It's so tempting, like the minister was saying, it's about the likes and shares. If you're going to be obsessed with notifications and the likes and shares, you will sometimes get lost. And not just lost, you'll feel disheartened and disillusioned and disappointed. There needn't be any of it. So I want to read these lines because I love them. And with your permission, it's on page 79. With my ancestors having lived in the hills of Mizoram for more than a century, generations of us have known no home or hearth other than Mizoram. When it first dawned on me that I belonged to a non-indigenous community and was perceived as an outsider, it hurt. But when I look back at my lived experience of more than 3 decades of navigating the waters of exclusivity, there have been storms, yet my ship sails on. For the welcoming harbors of inclusions are aplenty too. One just needs to anchor at the right spot. Just brilliant. So I just want to conclude by saying words have the power to heal. Words also have the power to hurt. And at some stage, at every stage in our life, we will have to deal with both hurting and healing. And this is where books, ideas, and imagination can be the salve when almost nothing else is. So thank you very much for inviting me.